trying to play it cool. But inside I felt like I'd basically snuck into the royal ball, you know? Simply because Nick had such a truly otherworldly aura about her. And I mean, dang, Keith Urban and Nicole Kidman were once seen as Hollywood's perfect love story. But the truth behind their separation tells a very different story. Shocking divorce details are now breaking wide open, revealing cracks that have been carefully hidden for years. Whispers of betrayal, emotional distance, and a specific clause in their prenup paint a picture nobody really expected. And just when it seemed like it couldn't get any more dramatic, Keith's secret romance was finally exposed. Join us as we dive into the details of what really went down before the split. Dreams and demons. Keith Urban's story before meeting Nicole Kidman was shaped by one main thing: music. It wasn't just part of his life. Nah, it was the very thing that pushed him forward. Even when struggles kept dragging him back, his years before fame and love were packed with small wins, long nights, setbacks, and a constant fight to prove himself. As a young man, he stepped on tiny stages in Australia and played wherever he could. Local talent contests, bars, and community shows became his training ground. He was determined to stand out in a place where country music wasn't exactly the biggest sound, but he never let that stop him. Every performance gave him more confidence, and every time he held a guitar in his hands, he felt one step closer to the future he pictured in his head. By the late 1980s, he was already pretty well known in small circles. He worked hard to mix traditional country with a more modern energy, and people started noticing his guitar skills set him apart. He gained a reputation as someone who could bring real creativity. He recorded songs in Australia and slowly built a small but steady following. Still, he kept looking beyond. He wanted America because Nashville was where country music truly lived. In 1991, he released his first album in Australia. It gave him a taste of recognition, but he knew his dream wouldn't be complete if he stayed there. So in the early 1990s, he packed up and moved to Nashville. It was a huge risk because the city was packed with talented people chasing the exact same dream. But Keith was determined. He showed up with a guitar, a strong work ethic, and the belief that he had something different to offer. Life in Nashville was rough. Rejection kept hitting him again and again. Record labels were tough to impress, and opportunities slipped away way more often than they appeared. To survive, he played guitar for other artists in recording studios and on stage. He joined a band called The Ranch, hoping it would finally give him that breakthrough moment. They recorded music, toured, and built an image, but it still wasn't enough to push him into the spotlight the way he wanted. At some point, the pressure of chasing a dream in a new country started weighing heavy on him, and he eventually turned to illegal substances and alcohol, first as an escape, then as a dangerous habit. Addiction crept into his life slowly, but refused to let go. Eventually, his relationship with his longtime girlfriend, Laura Sigler, started cracking under the pressure of these struggles. They had been together for years, and she had supported him through a lot. They even talked about building a future together. But addiction created distance, and promises slowly turned into disappointment. Still, Keith never let go of the music. No matter how rough the nights got, he always found his way back to his guitar. Music became both the cause of his stress and the cure for his pain. He wrote songs that reflected his personal battles. His voice carried real emotion because it came from lived experience. And slowly, step by step, things started to change. By the late 1990s, his persistence finally started paying off. His guitar skills opened doors in Nashville, and people began seeing him not just as a session player, but as an artist in his own right. In 1999, he released his first solo album in the United States. Songs from that album started hitting radio stations, and audiences responded with real excitement. His sound felt different, country at its core, but with touches of rock and pop that gave it wider appeal. Success began following him. He gained fans across America, started playing bigger shows, and received recognition from the country music industry. His reputation grew quickly, and soon he was seen as one of the most promising new stars in Nashville. Awards and chart success confirmed he had finally broken through. After years of rejection and doubt, he had reached the place he had always dreamed about. But fame didn't magically erase the shadows in his life. Addiction still followed him, threatening to undo everything he had built. The pressure of constant touring and public attention made it even harder to stay in control. Behind the scenes, he faced the painful reality that his personal life was falling apart even while his professional life was skyrocketing. On stage, he gave everything he had. Off stage, he struggled to keep balance. Yet every song, every album, every tour became proof that he could rise above the difficulties, even if only for a while. By the early 2000s, Keith Urban had become a major name in country music. His mix of talent, charm, and powerful songs made him stand out in a crowded field. He had traveled a long road. The journey wasn't easy, but he refused to quit. Every setback, every painful decision, every lonely night added weight to the music he shared. And by the time fate brought Nicole Kidman into his life, Keith Urban had already lived through years of struggle and triumph that shaped him into the man he had become. A Hollywood love story. Keith Urban and Nicole Kidman first met at a gala event in Los Angeles in 2005. It was a gathering of Australians and their friends. At that time, Keith had Nicole's phone number, but he didn't call her right away. Days passed. Weeks slipped by without a word. Then finally, months later, he decided to reach out. Their conversations started slowly. They talked about small things. They chatted more and more, and the connection just felt easy. Nicole felt something shift when she saw Keith early one morning standing at her apartment door. He had flowers for her. It was just after her 38th birthday. The gesture was simple, but it touched her deeply. In that moment, she realized he might actually be the one. By early 2006, they started appearing publicly together. They were spotted at big events, including the Grammy Awards, sitting close and looking at each other warmly. People could sense it. This wasn't just friendship anymore. By May, at another gala, Nicole referred to Keith as her fiancé. He had joined her as her date, and she seemed proud, saying the words, "My fiancé." They had moved quickly in public, but privately the feelings had been growing for months. In June, they decided to marry. The ceremony took place on a beachside estate in Australia. Family, friends, and industry figures came together. There was joy, laughter, and a celebration everywhere. For a brief moment, the world around them felt calm. They were together, moving forward. It was beautiful. You know, you find the person you're meant to be with. And in their case, there was no doubt in their minds that this was exactly what had happened. But soon after, life showed its darker side. Very quickly after becoming husband and wife, Keith found himself battling old demons again. Restless nights, drinking, the mind racing. Nicole saw it was too much, that something had pushed him beyond what he could handle alone. So she stepped in. She gathered people who cared about him, people who understood his struggles. She wanted him to see what she saw. The intervention came. It was urgent. It felt necessary. Keith accepted help and entered rehab. The days there stretched long. He had to face parts of himself he had been avoiding. He felt shame. He felt fear. But he also felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Real care that existed beyond fame and music. Nicole stayed close. She visited, sent messages, and held space for him. She didn't walk away. She chose to ride the storm with him. During that time, the album he had been working on was still released. The industry kept moving, and fans still expected music. Awards were still coming. People still praised his talent. But inside rehab, the nights were heavier. He looked across therapy rooms and saw others battling their own shadows. He saw how big the weight of his life had grown, and he realized what could happen if he didn't change. When rehab ended, he stepped back into public life. Nicole was still there, holding on to hope. They appeared together at events again and began building a life in Nashville. They bought a home, created routines, and tried to balance touring, work, and family. Over time, they became parents. In 2008, they welcomed a daughter. Suddenly life had new rhythms. Late-night feedings, hospital visits, first words, first steps. Beautiful moments mixed with difficult ones. Public life still brought pressure. Keith toured constantly. Nicole traveled for film projects. Sometimes distance stretched between them for weeks or months. But when they reunited, they tried to stay close. Nicole supported him at shows. Keith cheered for her performances on film sets. They were constantly balancing two huge careers that often pulled them in different directions. Over the years, their public image became that of a couple who had survived early crises. People saw Nicole standing by Keith when illness or exhaustion crept in. They saw Keith praise her in interviews and show affection on stage. They walked red carpets together, celebrated birthdays, and shared milestones. Fans believed they were watching a love story that had struggles but real commitment. Still, inside their private life, challenges remained. Tiredness, miscommunication, distance, nights when work got in the way, times when touring schedules or filming kept them apart longer than they wanted. The shadow of addiction never fully disappeared either. It stayed in the background, a reminder of how far Keith had come, but also how easily things could fall apart again. Nicole helped set boundaries. Together, they held on to promises made in private. They understood that love meant showing up even when life felt heavy. They built routines that protected fragile spaces, quiet time at home, checking in during long separations, small gestures that kept them connected. Through those years, their relationship carried both real struggle and real joy. In the middle of fame, pressure, and endless schedules, they kept holding onto each other. But when Keith Urban and Nicole Kidman first married, their union carried more than just love and promises. There was caution too. The prenup they signed included a condition that revealed Nicole's worry. It stated Keith would receive $600,000 for every year he remained free from substance abuse. On the surface, it looked like protection. But honestly, it showed how deeply she feared his past demons might return. In Nashville, whispers about Keith's past were never far away. People in the industry knew the habits that had followed him for years. Stories moved through recording studios and backstage corridors like gossip carried by the wind. His musical talent was undeniable, but so were the rumors about his weaknesses. For Nicole, who built her career on discipline and control, stepping into that world meant carrying the weight of those whispers along with the marriage. Just months after their wedding, Keith returned to rehab. Fame, pressure, and the pull of old demons pushed him back into the fight he thought he had left behind. For Nicole, who had stood before the world in a wedding gown only months earlier, it was a brutal return to reality. Their marriage had barely begun, and already the cracks were visible. She had dreamed of stability. Instead, she found herself caught inside a storm. Even before the wedding, scandal had lingered. A model once claimed she had been involved with Keith while he was already engaged to Nicole. Whether true or not, the rumor refused to die. In Hollywood, gossip moves faster than truth, and it became another cloud hanging over his name. For Nicole, who had already endured years of media scrutiny during her divorce from Tom Cruise, these claims were yet another reminder that privacy in her life would always be fragile. Nicole had always guarded her public image carefully. She knew how to close doors, reveal only small pieces of herself, and hide pain behind a perfect smile. But behind the walls of their home, the weight of Keith's struggles made that control harder to maintain. The world saw two stars together. Privately, the strain kept growing. Headlines, rumors, and relapses added pressure year after year. Time slowly created more distance. Their careers often kept them on opposite sides of the world. Keith remained tied to Nashville, writing songs and touring. Nicole's projects carried her across oceans, from Australia to Europe and back again. That separation became visible not just in their schedules, but in their choices about homes and investments. Multiple properties and independent routines started making their lives look more separate than shared. For Keith, every mistake carried double the weight. He wasn't just carrying the weight of his past on his shoulders. He was also dealing with the heavy pressure of proving he was worthy of a life he had built with Nicole. The clause in their prenup was not simply a boring line of legal text. Nah, it was way more than that. It stood as a symbol of the fragile balance they were living with every single day. It became a constant reminder that their life together would always be tied to his struggle with addiction. Every slip-up brought those reminders right back again. Almost like money and loyalty were locked together in one long test, you know? The fairy tale image they showed the world had already been reshaped by hardship, by separation, and by choices that hinted their marriage might not be as solid as it looked from the outside. The story of their early years together wasn't written only through celebrations or flashy public appearances. Nope. It was also marked by contracts, conditions, and the ever-present fear that the past could come creeping back. Their love carried hope, sure, but it also carried the weight of rules, mistrust, and signs of distance that were kind of inevitable. Keith Urban's alleged affair. As the years rolled by, the marriage between Keith Urban and Nicole Kidman started facing rumors that spread far beyond Nashville and reached the wider world. At first, they sounded like the usual celebrity gossip that follows famous people everywhere. Nothing new, right? But slowly the tone changed. People close to them began talking about things that sounded less like random gossip and more like an open secret. The idea that Keith was seeing someone else became harder and harder to ignore. No confirmed name popped up at first, but the whispers were enough for folks in the business circles to start paying real close attention. For Nashville, honestly, this wasn't exactly shocking. That city, where music careers rise and fall under bright lights, had long been the home base of Keith and Nicole. Seeing them together had become part of the city's identity. But behind the stages, locals said the vibe in the air felt different. Talk about a woman in Keith's circle began to sound real. Nicole herself, according to some reports, already knew the truth. She supposedly knew who this woman might be, even while the rest of the world was still trying to figure it out. This chapter felt different from the struggles they had faced before. Nicole had stood beside him through rehab, through long nights when addiction pulled hard at him. She stayed when the headlines painted him in the worst possible light. She stuck around through all that chaos. But this time the problem wasn't a relapse. It wasn't about bad habits. It was about affection, about Keith's heart drifting toward someone else. And yeah, that difference made everything heavier. A partner might forgive a relapse, but watching love slowly drift toward another person? Man, that's a whole different kind of pain. Observers started noticing the cracks through small but telling details. The couple hadn't been seen together in public for months. When Keith bought a new house on his own, people quickly pointed out that moves like that rarely scream unity. At the same time, Nicole was spotted making plans away from him. She even applied for opportunities abroad without his name attached. Those were signals fans and reporters simply couldn't ignore. The story picked up more steam when attention turned toward a young musician named Maggie Ball. She appeared often on social media, and soon people began connecting her to Keith. During one live performance, Keith made a change that shocked the crowd. He altered the lyrics of a song that had originally been written for Nicole. The new line had Maggie's name instead. Maggie. And he's singing to her, his guitarist. I'll be your guitar player. So to me it looked like he was rubbing Nicole's face in it in public. This didn't look like some random mistake. For a guy who had spent decades carefully shaping his public image, Keith definitely knew the audience would notice something like that. His decision to sing those words openly felt like a deliberate message. To many watching, it seemed he wasn't even trying to hide anymore. It almost felt like he wanted Nicole and the whole world to see what was going on. Standing on stage with a guitar in his hand, he delivered that change with a confidence that looked almost smug. For those paying attention, it didn't seem like a passionate slip at all. It looked more like a performance designed to humiliate his wife. It was almost as if he chose to broadcast his affection for someone else in the very place where Nicole had once stood as his muse. That move shocked many people, mainly because Nicole had always been known for controlling her public image like a pro. She had mastered the art of privacy, often keeping family matters locked behind closed doors. Seeing Keith act so openly, so freely, in a way that pulled attention toward those rumors clashed hard with the tight control Nicole had maintained for years. This wasn't just betrayal. It felt like a direct challenge to her carefully built reputation. Still, as time passed, the rumors about an affair only grew louder. Some people insisted Maggie was the woman at the center of everything. Others claimed there might be more names involved. Nashville insiders talked about at least two other possibilities. Maybe Keith was trying to mislead the public. Or maybe the story was even messier than it first appeared. No one could say for sure, but all that confusion only added fuel to the fire. For longtime followers, what stood out the most wasn't simply the possibility of another woman. It was the fact that Keith seemed to enjoy the attention. His career had taught him exactly how the media machine worked. He knew every action would be seen, shared, and talked about. The way he sang during that performance suggested he knew exactly what he was doing. For Nicole, this wasn't just personal pain. It was a public declaration playing out in front of their fans and even their children. People began asking why he would go down that road. Why risk not only his marriage, but also the respect of his family? Different theories started floating around. Some said he was tired of standing in the background. For nearly 2 decades, his name had always been tied to Nicole's. To the world, he often looked like Nicole Kidman's husband first and a star second. After years of carrying that image, maybe he wanted to break free, even if it meant blowing up the marriage in a very public way. At the center of it all was the feeling that something had shifted for good. Nicole, who had stayed through addiction and early scandal, was now facing something she couldn't simply wait out. For the first time in almost 20 years, the world saw cracks that smiles and careful planning couldn't hide anymore. The signs were there for anyone paying attention. And behind it all stood a wife who already knew their story was slowly coming to an end. The divorce. Nicole Kidman had spent many years beside Keith Urban, but the final stretch of their marriage changed in ways that couldn't be ignored. By the time whispers about another woman grew loud enough, the weight of everything she had carried started pressing harder. Her story during this time wasn't only about love ending. It was also about control slowly slipping away while she fought to rebuild her ground. Inside her own life, it felt like walls were being drawn. The months leading up to the divorce were filled with small signs that spoke louder than words. Their relationship had survived rough early years when addiction nearly destroyed it, and Nicole had stood beside him through that storm. She entered that chapter believing time and support could heal things. But this time, the challenge wasn't the same. She wasn't facing another battle against alcohol or substances. This was emotional. It was intimate. It was a bond forming between Keith and another person that left Nicole without a place. For Nicole, reputation had always mattered. She learned long ago the world would watch every step she took. When the rumors grew stronger, she chose silence instead of messy public fights. And in that silence, her actions spoke loud. She filed the divorce papers and walked into court with her decision clear. Her filing for divorce in Nashville told the world she had reached her limit. 19 years ended in lines of ink on official documents. The legal side of things moved in steady order. Their prenup had long been a topic of conversation, especially its clause about Keith's sobriety tied to yearly payments. It became part of how people framed their separation. Now it returned to the spotlight as people questioned what role it might play. Was it binding? Was it symbolic? For Nicole, it had never been just legal language. It was proof she had tried to protect their marriage from what she feared most. Now that same clause became evidence of how their union finally dissolved. But Nicole shifted her focus toward her daughters. She requested to be their primary caregiver, making it clear where her strength would now go. Her role as a mother became central as she faced the collapse of her marriage. She drew the lines of separation not just in her heart, but also in law. The world saw the headline. Nicole Kidman divorces Keith Urban after nearly 2 decades. Inside, she carried the weight of a decision that had taken years to build. Outside, she stood firm. Nicole appeared at a Dallas event soon after filing. She wore a black gown, carried herself with calm poise, and presented an award as if her personal life wasn't falling apart. But beneath that composure, the pain was fresh. Still, she stepped forward. Her presence sent a message she wasn't going to hide. The ring was gone from her hand. Her hair was styled differently. Every detail of her appearance sent signals. She was still standing, still moving forward, even if her heart felt heavy. Behind closed doors, the divorce negotiations stretched across custody, child support, assets, and future living arrangements. Her daughters came first. Nicole had always tried to shield them from media attention, but the separation placed them right in the spotlight. She set boundaries. She arranged schedules. She created protections. She wanted their days to feel safe, even while their family structure was changing forever. Some sources in Nashville say the rumors are everywhere. People there talking nonstop. Insiders believe there may be something more than just a professional connection between Keith and Maggie. However, Maggie's father, Chuck Baugh, responded to the rumors on social media. He reportedly shared a TikTok video and captioned it, "No, just no," possibly rejecting the claims. But he also admitted he didn't know everything, saying that aside from his daughter being a guitar player for Keith, he wasn't aware of anything else. Relationships under the spotlight demand more than ordinary love. They ask for compromise, for patience, for forgiveness. Nicole spent years asking herself whether boundaries were enough, whether support alone could carry both of them through the storms. She watched fame, music, and addiction collide again and again. She offered support. She offered loyalty. She gave herself fully even when the odds were stacked against them. Now, she had reached a point where even her patience could stretch no further. The press circled around every detail. They noted Nicole's absence from joint appearances, reported on properties being sold or purchased, and speculated endlessly about what would happen next. Every article and headline chipped away at the privacy she wished to keep. But she never broke in front of them. Her silence became her shield. While others argued about motives and rumors, she focused on what she could control: her children, her work, her path forward. As the divorce continued moving ahead, Nicole stayed steady. She let his actions speak for themselves. She refused to compete with public displays. Her way remained quiet, but it was powerful. Every appearance she made reminded the world she was still strong even as her marriage fell apart. Through it all, Nicole's decision to end her marriage after 19 years stood as the clearest step she had taken. Now she has stepped into a new chapter, one written in her own hand, not shadowed by the choices of someone else. Do you think there is more to the divorce story than Keith Urban's rumored affair? Let us know your views in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe to this channel. Before you go, watch the other videos on your channel.